How can you ensure data integrity when transferring files to Azure Blob Storage using the Azure Command Line Interface (CLI)? You can use the Azure Storage Blob upload command with the validate content flag in the Azure CLI. This flag ensures that the content is validated using an MD5 hash before and after the upload, ensuring data integrity. Explain how Azure Storage's table storage differs from Blob storage in terms of data storage and use cases. Azure Table Storage is a NoSQL data store optimized for structured data and dynamic queries, suitable for storing large amounts of semi-structured data. Blob storage, on the other hand, is designed for unstructured data like files, images, and backups. How can you ensure secure access to Azure Storage resources over the public internet using Shared Access Signatures (SAS)? You can generate a Shared Access Signature (SAS) token with specific permissions and constraints and provide it to authorized users. This allows them to access Azure Storage resources without exposing account keys and without direct access to the public internet. Explain how geo-replication options in Azure Storage enhance data durability and availability for storage accounts. Geo-replication options like Geo-redundant storage (GRS) and read-access geo-redundant storage (RAGRS) replicate data to secondary regions. GRS ensures data durability, while RAGRS allows read access to the secondary copy, enhancing availability. How can you implement fine-grained access control to individual objects stored in Azure Blob Storage using Shared Access Signatures (SAS)? You can generate a Shared Access Signature (SAS) with specific permissions and constraints for a particular blob. This allows you to control access to individual objects within a container, providing fine-grained access control. Explain how Azure Storage's Blob Storage account type differs from the general-purpose account type. The Blob Storage account type is designed for scenarios that require only Blob Storage capabilities and does not support other services like queues and tables. The general-purpose account type supports a broader range of services, including blobs, queues, and tables. How can you ensure that sensitive data stored in Azure Blob Storage is encrypted and protected from unauthorized access? You can use Azure Blob Storage's built-in encryption options, including encryption at rest and encryption in transit. Additionally, you can leverage Azure Key Vault to manage encryption keys and ensure strong data protection. Explain the advantages of using Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 over Azure Blob Storage for big data analytics. Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 provides a hierarchical namespace, POSIX-like permissions, and support for big data analytics frameworks. It offers better support for data organization, access control, and analytics scenarios compared to Azure Blob Storage. How can you use Azure Blob Storage's Access Tier feature to optimize storage costs for infrequently accessed data? You can configure Azure Blob Storage's Access Tier to transition infrequently accessed data to the cool or archive tiers. This reduces storage costs while ensuring that the data remains accessible when needed. Explain how Azure Storage's Archive Access Tier can be utilized for long-term data retention and compliance. The Archive Access Tier is designed for long-term data retention at a lower cost. You can use it to store data that is rarely accessed but needs to be retained for compliance or regulatory requirements. How can you optimize data storage costs for Azure Table Storage? To optimize data storage costs for Azure Table Storage, you can design your data model to minimize unnecessary data duplication, use efficient partition keys, and periodically purge or archive data that is no longer needed. Explain the significance of Azure Storage's Blob service properties and how they can impact data storage and access. Blob service properties in Azure Storage allow you to configure settings like default access tier, soft delete policies, and CRS, cross-origin resource sharing rules. These properties impact data storage, access, and management behaviors for your storage account. How can you implement automatic failover for Azure Blob Storage using Read Access Geo-Redundant Storage, RAG-RES? Read Access Geo-Redundant Storage, RAG-RES, provides automatic failover capabilities in the event of a regional outage. By accessing the secondary copy of data in a paired region, you can continue to read and access your data even during a failover. Explain how Azure Blob Storage's append blobs can be used for scenarios involving logging or auditing data. Append blobs are designed for scenarios where data is added sequentially, making them suitable for scenarios like logging or auditing. Each append operation appends data to the end of the blob, ensuring that data is preserved in its order of creation. How can you enforce retention policies and data deletion for blobs stored in Azure Blob Storage? You can implement retention policies by using Blob service properties or lifecycle management policies. These policies define how long data should be retained before it's automatically deleted, helping you enforce data retention requirements. Explain how Azure Storage's Blob Soft Delete feature can help recover accidentally deleted blobs. Blob Soft Delete retains deleted blobs for a specified retention period, allowing you to recover accidentally deleted data during that window. This feature provides a safety net against unintended deletions. How can you implement an event-driven architecture using Azure Functions and Azure Blob Storage's Event Grid integration? You can use Azure Blob Storage's Event Grid integration to trigger Azure Functions whenever certain events, such as blob creations or deletions, occur in the storage account. This enables you to build event-driven workflows and processes. How can you monitor and troubleshoot performance issues in Azure Storage Services? You can use Azure Monitor to collect metrics and logs related to Azure Storage Services performance. Additionally, tools like Azure Metrics Explorer and Storage Analytics provide insights into performance bottlenecks and help in troubleshooting issues. Explain how Azure Storage's Blob service properties can be configured to enforce secure access policies. Blob service properties allow you to configure features like shared access signatures (SAS) and CRS rules. By configuring SAS permissions and origin restrictions using CRS, you can enforce secure and controlled access to your blob data. How can you migrate on-premises file servers to Azure Blob Storage while preserving the existing directory structure? Azure Data Box Gateway can be used to migrate on-premises file servers to Azure Blob Storage while maintaining the directory structure. It acts as a cache, allowing you to maintain familiar file structures while storing data in Azure. Explain how Azure Storage's append blob type can be used for scenarios involving data collection from multiple sources. Append blobs are suitable for scenarios where data is added sequentially, making them useful for data collection from multiple sources. Each source can append its data to the blob, ensuring that data is preserved in the order of arrival. How can you implement data replication between Azure Blob Storage accounts in different regions using AZCopy? AZCopy is a command-line tool that allows you to copy data between Azure Storage accounts. By specifying the source and destination accounts, you can use AZCopy to replicate data between different regions. Explain the concept of soft delete for containers in Azure Blob Storage and its benefits. Soft delete for containers in Azure Blob Storage retains deleted containers along with their blobs for a specified retention period. This provides a recovery window during which accidentally deleted containers and their contents can be restored. How can you use Azure Storage Explorer to manage and manipulate Azure Storage resources? Azure Storage Explorer is a graphical user interface tool that allows you to manage Azure Storage resources. You can use it to upload and download files, create containers, set access permissions, and view properties of storage assets. Explain how Azure Storage's Geo-Zone Redundant Storage (GZRS) provides improved data availability. Geo-Zone Redundant Storage (GZRS) replicates data to a secondary region within the same geographic zone. This enhances data availability by providing redundancy within the same region, protecting against regional outages. How can you manage access to Azure Storage resources using Shared Key Authorization and Shared Access Signatures (SAS)? Shared Key Authorization uses account keys to grant access to storage resources, while Shared Access Signatures (SAS) allow you to delegate limited and time-bound access to specific resources without sharing keys. Explain how Azure Blob Storage's page blob type can be used for scenarios involving virtual machine disks. Page blobs are optimized for storing virtual machine disks. They provide random read and write access, making them suitable for scenarios where you need to manage and manipulate disk data at the page level. How can you enable secure and authorized access to Azure Storage resources from Azure virtual machines using managed identities? Managed identities provide an identity for an Azure service instance. You can assign the managed identity to your Azure virtual machine, and it can then authenticate itself to Azure Storage services, enabling secure access without credentials. Explain the benefits of using Azure Storage services for media streaming and content delivery. Azure Storage services can be used to store media files and content for streaming. By leveraging Azure Content Delivery Network (CDN), you can distribute media content globally, reducing latency and improving end-user experience.
Hey, if you like the content, please subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a bite of Azure brilliance.